Welcome to The Creative Influencer, where we discuss all things creative with an emphasis on influencers. The Creative Influencer is hosted by John Pfeiffer. John is an entertainment attorney in Santa Monica, California, who represents influencers and other creatives.
Today's interview breaks with our usual Q&A format with me asking the questions. Instead, in a bit of shameless self-promotion, I am one of two participants on a panel to discuss influencer do's and don'ts. The other panelist is Niel Robertson. This was fun, and I hope you enjoy the discussion.
Who is an attorney that works with influencers and practices out of California. So I think we're going to start the session with having each of you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about how you started working with influencers. So John, we'll have you start.
Hi, thank you. My name is John Pfeiffer. I'm an entertainment lawyer in Santa Monica, California. I started doing motion pictures and televisions for 25 years now. And then about 5 years ago, I got a call from a mother of an influencer. They didn't know any lawyers. And they asked if I represented influencers. And of course I said, sure. Why wouldn't you? And I realized it is such an interesting space and frankly, a fun space. And then a couple of years ago, we started a podcast called The Creative Influencer, which is devoted to nothing but influencer issues. And a substantial portion of our blog is related to influencers. And we'll get to it in a little bit when we talk about representation, but I have free downloads for influencers that don't believe they're ready to hire a lawyer, but on how to comply with FTC issues and all the other disclosures that you have to. So that's a little bit about me.
That's amazing. And it is a very interesting area of law. Niel, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you started working with influencers? Uh-oh. Niel, I think we're having a problem with your sound. Let's see here if we can get this sorted.
I would sing while we're doing this, but I can't sing.
Can you try and chat again?
Oh,
yeah, I gotcha. Great.
Oh, great. Sorry about that. My fault. I said I've been building companies for most of my life, started companies. I have been in the marketing, tech, and ad tech world over and over again. I've always found that that's sort of the forefront usually of technology and business. Previously, I built a company that was one of the largest affiliate companies in the world, a company called BigLink. We had a couple million bloggers on it. The network produced a couple $1 billion of GMV through the network, and it sold a couple years ago to a company called Sovereign. I got really interested in influencers because I saw sort of the success of bloggers and how they were developing different ways of monetizing their blogs. And there actually was, still is, this amazing fitness influencer out of Adelaide, Australia. Her name is Kayla Itsines. I don't know if you're familiar with her. She built this incredible business building like a 90-day, like sort of like Beachbody guide, and really just using her Instagram platform to sell it. That business, I think, is a $70 million a year business now. This was a few years ago. I said, I wonder if I could do that myself. And so I found a fitness trainer here in LA. She had about 30,000 followers. She was a fitness trainer to a lot of Instagram celebrities and decided to just build my own book. So rented a white room, did the photography, learned Photoshop, and built this really beautiful 135-page, body guide, very similar to Kayla's, and just using her Instagram following, put it online on a Shopify store and started to push it. And we did well with it. You know, we didn't break the bank, but she had only 30,000 followers, which now seems sort of paltry. Back then it was a lot bigger. And we were able to basically break even on the project. And it just convinced me that this is really the future. Social selling was the future. So I got into the influencer marketing industry and decided to build influence.co, which we'll talk about a little bit more, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. And so when did you start influence.co?
The business is about 4.5 years old now.
Wow. Okay. Wow. That young and such tremendous growth. That's really incredible. So, how tell us a little bit about what influence.co does. Like, what is it that you do,
Sure.
and what is it specifically that you offer to influencers?
Sure. So when I decided to get into the industry, we looked around and we saw a lot of companies 4.5 years ago jumping in and providing essentially a service where they found brands on one hand and they matched with influencers on the other, and they sat in the middle, and many times they ran campaigns or created a marketplace and tried to take some kind of a transaction fee for that. Well, that's fine, and those businesses are interesting. We really thought that we saw all those businesses focusing on the business side of the marketplace and not on the influencer side. We fundamentally have always believed that being an influencer or creator would go from being a hobbyist pursuit or a side hustle into something that people took seriously as a profession. So we stepped back and said, how do we super serve this generation of people that are starting with a completely new profession? We call it the first digitally native profession, being an influencer. And the model we came up with is actually quite a familiar one. It's LinkedIn. Everybody's been very used to using LinkedIn, but the influencer and creator world and job and resume doesn't fit into LinkedIn. The way LinkedIn work doesn't really serve people that are trying to do that as a job. So we've been building piece by piece the building blocks of a new version of LinkedIn designed for influencers, creators, and the people that work with them. And on the platform, you can build your own professional resume, which you can use on the platform and off the platform. You can connect with other influencers. We've got incredible community that's growing every single day. You can ask questions, learn questions, share branded content, get feedback from people. And then we have about 250,000 people on the platform now, and about 75,000 of those are brands. So there also is a way to connect with brands and, of course, work with them. But we have a very different model, one that's much more like LinkedIn, where it's sort of a job posting the brand puts up and you apply to it if you're interested, and we just connect you and get out of the way. So yeah, it's been a really fun journey putting the influencer in the center of our crosshairs and saying, how can we just give this group of people everything they need to be successful? And we actually find ourselves in quite a unique position as thinking about the world that way. It's really fun though to watch, like especially this year, there's been just a wave of new companies that have focused on the influencer and the creator as their target and not as the business trying to work with them. And so we're really happy to, because we work with a lot of those people on the platform, we're really happy to see that come online.
That's really exciting. And so just like kind of a follow-up question to that, in terms of, collaborations, you said that you have 75,000 brands, which is a lot. Do you sort of does the platform facilitate or make some connections for collaborations?
Yeah, so again, you can always think of like how we work very similarly to LinkedIn. So if I was a business, I could go on LinkedIn, I could create a company page all for free. I could start searching for people I might need to hire for my business all for free. I could message them on the platform all for free. And LinkedIn just provides that as a service to the broader community. Of course, they have ways that they make money, right? In the same way that we do. If you are a business and you don't want to do all that hard work, you can essentially pay LinkedIn to market your job to people for you, and they apply to you, and they've got a tool set, LinkedIn Recruiter, that does that. That's our business model as well. But we don't take a percentage of the money that you spend on influencers. We don't take a transaction fee. We don't manage the campaigns. It's very much this LinkedIn model where you can do it all yourself, or if you just want our help marketing it to our incredible community of influencers, we'll do that. And then we provide you the tools to help kind of manage them. So that's been our approach to it. And I think today, or at the end of last month, there was 660 active campaigns that influencers could try to work on. I think that's an order of magnitude bigger than any other place on the internet where you can find collaboration opportunities.
Absolutely. So if you're an influencer, you definitely need to sign up. Okay. And so, John, the topic here today is sort of collaborations, do's and don'ts. What are the top areas where you see influencers and content creators getting themselves in hot water from a legal perspective? Because obviously, if you're not legally compliant, that's a big don't, right?
Right. I'm going to take it from a glass half full perspective and talk about the do's.
Okay.
Like, I'm a lawyer, I can talk about don'ts all day, but I'm going to try the do's first. I have three big do's. The first do is to view yourself as a business. You are a startup. Treat yourself that way. You have to keep your money separate. This is not, if you get a check in from a brand, you just can't put it in your account and not keep track of where it came from, because you're going to have to file taxes. And you're going to have to keep track of this stuff. And you want to develop your brand, just like any other startup would do. and I know there's going to be a lot of kind of feeling out where you're going to be. I mean, I had one client that started out, she did makeup tutorials, and then she realized she doesn't even wear makeup. So she did a complete pivot. So do treat yourself as a startup, because you are. I mean, use that model. The second thing is do follow the law. And I'm going to oversimplify it, but if you follow these things, it's it's going to keep you out of hot water. Is first, disclose that you have a relationship with the brand. I mean, the people that will do to make it look organic, that, oh, I'm just using this, but they're paid to do it. Well, one, that's against the law, but two, just disclose it because people expect it. And you actually have to be honest. It is, all of my clients, I have them before a brand deal where they're going to give some sort of review. The brand has to send the product to the client to see if they even like it. So if it gives them a rash, if it's something, you can't say a positive review about that. So actually give an honest opinion when you're doing that. And then the third, and this is where the lawyer comes in, is the intellectual property rights, the trademarks. You can't be, I mean, I don't have any logo on my shirt, but if I were in a video for one brand and I had a logo for another brand in the video, you've already violated the contract. So you just have to be aware of what's in the background. I'm in my home office now and I'm looking in the background. I don't have any brand stuff up. I do have my kindergarten diploma up, by the way. This is an aside. And then the last thing I'll say is read the contract. I know it's legalese, but it's going to tell you what you have to deliver. It's going to, the deliverables part of it. At a minimum, it's going to have to tell you when you do it. And then it'll also talk about what you just give away, what you just gave away. Did you give away the right to use this forever? Did you give away the right? I mean, my biggest fear for a client is that I'll do some brand deal and then I'll be driving down Sunset Boulevard and I'll see their image on a billboard. And Sunset's famous for these billboards everywhere. I see their image because I didn't carve down the rights close enough. So those are my three do's. Is just treat yourself like a business, because you are. Be honest when you're reviewing things. And then three, actually read the paperwork.
Yeah. And I would say too, the other thing, it's funny, I graduated from law school in, oh gosh, I think it was it like 2003, 2006?
I graduated before you.
But I had a partner that was a little bit, more senior, and then a partner that was more junior. And the more junior partner used to always tell me, like, you're using too much, like, simplify the words. Let's, that's the old way of doing things. The new way of doing things is using more simple language. So I would add to that is that you'd be surprised if you do read the contract. But sometimes there's legalese, but a lot of times, especially younger lawyers are using more, they're using less terms of art. The attached here too is like, not in vogue so much anymore. So you'll see a lot less legalese in some of the contracts these days. So, don't be afraid to just read through it.
They don't say attached here to anymore. It's incorporated herein by reference. And they'll have a link to a website with a 27-page terms and conditions. Yeah. Those are binding. And I actually do print those out and I do read them for the client, because we just did one Monday where it was a YouTube video, but then in the terms and conditions online, it gave them the right to use it in all traditional advertising. The name, the image, like they could be in magazine photos. It's like, no, we didn't do that deal. That deal will cost you double. So it really is important to read it.
Yeah, definitely. So Niel, you have been a part of so many collaborations with brands and influencers. What do you find to be the most common mistakes that you see influencers making when trying to secure paid collaborations?
Sure. I mean, I think I think brands and influencers, frankly, make a lot of the same mistakes. So I'll just sort of lump it as, generally speaking, what does everybody struggle with? By and large, this is a young industry. This is an industry where most transactions or they don't have the benefit of someone like John and his experience. They're just getting started, both on the business and the influencer side. And so there's some just basic things that people forget to do. Number one is just write down in some form of email what it is that you've agreed to. I think, because we don't run campaigns, a lot of people don't come to us when they experience problems, but if they can't arbitrate it with the brand directly or the influencer directly, they will come to us. And 99.9% of those is because someone didn't write something down and something was assumed. And so it doesn't take very long to write down, this is what I'm agreeing to, these are the dates I'm agreeing to it on, these are the platforms I'm agreeing to it. If the product doesn't arrive, this is what happens. If the product does arrive and it's incorrect, what happens? Or I decide that I don't want to review it, what happens if I miss my deadlines? These are essentially all the structural pieces of a contract, but if you can't get to the point of actually writing a contract, just write down what the common agreement is in email. And so I would say that very few of the arguments that I see people get into are debating something that was pre-agreed. It was debating what they thought the other person would assume would be the norm on something that wasn't agreed. And I think if John has materials that you can use to start off with, that's great. I don't think it's a problem for anybody to propose having a contract. Some influencers might feel sheepish about throwing a contract on the table with a young business that's, if they're only getting paid $60 to do something. There's a sort of level of practicality around what people can sort of afford to do from a review perspective. But if nothing else, taking a look at a document that is kind of a good industry vetted standard and try to go through and sort of pick out the main topical things that are trying to be covered. Like John was saying, like where can your imagery be used? Those kinds of things. What happens when, deadlines are met or products don't arrive or they don't meet a certain standard, et cetera. Like what we see a lot of times where a brand will send something to an influencer and then the influencer will get busy or not like the product or whatever. And then the influencer doesn't take the time to send the product back. And I think that's kind of one piece of professionalism that I would really encourage influencers to think about. The industry as of yet doesn't have any common rating system. There is no, Glassdoor for influencers. There is no Yelp for businesses that work with influencers. There is no endorsements on LinkedIn. Obviously, at scale, we think that providing some kind of this system is useful, but it does accumulate over time, and influencers do talk. And both as a business and an influencer, I would also just say, play the long game, like act as much as a professional like you can. Stick to, the high road if you find yourself in a tangle. Because over time, you want a lot of chances at bat to kind of work your way up to bigger and bigger contracts. And people do build reputations, whether they're rated publicly online or not. We see that already happening on the platform. When brands are bad actors and they try to post something on the platform, a number of influencers will go in and be like, I tried to work with this brand and I had a problem. So there's no official rating system, but people's memories are long on both sides of the equation. So
I definitely think that's true. Yeah. And that tags on to what John said, right? To treat yourself as a business. I can say, we work with a lot of influencers doing brand deals. And for two things that I can think of right now that kind of play into that. One, we definitely, the influencers that maybe worked with us and did something that wasn't necessarily a paid collaboration or came to supported us for one of our events. We remember those influencers when a paid collaboration comes along. So, I try and always think of them first, like, oh, they were really agreeable, or they went the extra mile here, or, they didn't love the product and they ended up sending it back to us, or offered to send it back. And oftentimes the client will say, no, it's okay. Maybe they can pass it along or donate it somewhere or what have you. And then from my side, as the business side, I've had clients that have not, they agreed to do a paid collaboration and the influencer met their end of the contract and then the client didn't pay the influencer and we paid out of our pocket before. And I do that because it's my business and it's my reputation on the line. And we have a good reputation in the industry because of stuff like that. So I think that your point, both of you made the same point, which is think of the long game, and your influencing is a business. And so you want to try and think of that. And there's those of us like on the PR side that, and the production side that do this over and over and over again. And we definitely, I don't have a rating system, maybe like, in like Yelp or whatever, but I have one in my head. And I'm guessing pretty much everybody else does too.
And,
So I think that that's really, really great advice.
and
Um,
Lori, I'd like to echo what Neil said,
yeah,
just to jump on it, because the point is so important. Is be easy to work with, because the long game, I mean, that's where the real money comes in, is when you have repeat the brand going for the influencer for repeat campaigns, which happens a lot. I mean,
hmm
they first have to know you. It's the old adage of sales. They have to know, like, and trust you. Once they know you, if they like you and they trust you, they'll go back to you before they'll go to a new influencer, because they know you're a known commodity.
yeah,
So easy to work with. I mean, it's Neil's point, but just look at the long game.
yeah. That's definitely true. There's probably like 30 influencers on our list that we work with over and over and over again. And like we've developed friendships with them over
Right.
time, you know? And we know we can call them if we need something or whatever. And likewise, we have some that we know are lovely, but a little bit more difficult to work with. And, maybe they're last on our list that we go
Oh,
to.
I have those clients that you have to negotiate the morals clause because they might be coming in an issue. And then you have those that's like, yeah, whatever, put in whatever you want. My client's not going to do anything to violate that.
Yeah, yeah. So,
So
I think that is important to recognize that you're a brand and along with a business, you're a brand. And so everything that you're putting out there, people are digesting it in a certain way. And some people are going to like what you put out there and some people aren't. Just make sure whatever you're doing is on whatever brand you're trying to create.
I, I would add um, one more dimension, which is in terms of professionalism. We see the more communicative you are, the more successful you are. It's a very small part of the whole spectrum of things to be professional about, or things to make sure you do in an engagement. But communicate, 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 communicate. Right? We have on our platform, we have a built-in messaging system, so you can organize all of your brand conversations. But I know people are spread between email and DM and messaging systems like ours. It's just really important to get in front of any changes that you have in plans. And so I would say one of the biggest complaints that bubble up to us is, again, not someone doing something wrong or malicious or creating a horrible piece of content, or all of a sudden, spewing vitriol and having some, breaking some morality clause or something that like gets you in trouble. It's just, oh, I'm so sorry. My grandma came into town and I got really busy and I had to move my apartment, and like the dog ate my homework, like Hall of Fame from influencers is insane. And I would say that 2 years ago, this was actually probably the biggest problem in the influencer and creator landscape, is that so many influencers and creators were flooding in, and there's such a mediocre level of professionalism. I think as people have realized they can make a serious business out of this, they've sort of self-regulated a bit. But it's a very, very quick way to get a bad reputation amongst brands and agencies who are talking to each other and things like that, to play the dog ate my homework thing. We see a lot less of it, but if you think back to your engagements with brands, and if you've ever pulled the dog ate my homework trick, I would just clean that one up really quickly, because it's really annoying to everybody involved.
Yeah, definitely. That we've experienced that, but I learned something when I went to work for the first law firm actually out of law school. One of the partners that I worked with, she gave me the best piece of advice, and it's just a great life piece of advice. If you don't have a contract, ask them when the deadline is. When do you want this posted by? And that way, and if it's not a realistic time frame for you, then it's okay, I think, to write back and be like, I have a lot of projects right now. I think that that's not realistic. I think from a brand perspective, they would rather just get an actual timeline from you rather than, you coming back to them with an excuse. It's the same way as any other job. Like if there's a deadline, you need to meet the deadline, barring some actual emergency. But I feel like a lot of times we get this on our end, is like influencers won't ask us for a deadline. And so sometimes we'll push back and say, hey, do you have a date, like when you feel like you would be able to, post the content by? And we'll we try to be flexible with them, because we don't know what their projects they have going on, and they're freelancers, right? So I think that's a really important aspect of it. The excuses definitely aren't good, and the way to avoid that is to ask, what for a deadline, and then I would calendar if I were on the influencing side, I would be calendaring my deadlines for things so that you don't miss anything.
And Lori, just let me give you the flip of that. If you're the influencer and a brand comes to you and says, I need it tomorrow, which happens more than you would think, just be very wary. Because if they're that disorganized about they need it for their campaign, they're going to be just as disorganized about getting a check in the mail to you.
Yes. I would definitely agree with that. Yeah. And, on our side, we will have brands that will come to us wanting to work, wanting results that quickly. And
Yeah.
we always know on our end, we just can't promise that because everything takes time. Quality takes time. So yeah, that's definitely a really great point, John. So, John, what are some negotiating tips that you can give influencers when trying to, sort out collaborations?
It depends on what the brand is. I mean, if you're doing a Google deal or you're doing a deal with YouTube directly, you're going to have very little wiggle room because they'll use the excuse, oh, we can't give it to you because then we'd have to give it to everybody, which I don't buy. But and the lawyers who work there, when they go someplace else, they're going to realize how frustrating that is. But that said, there's also the brands that they're first time brands. So they've pulled their contract off the internet. Many times it's inconsistent internally. One term will say you have to do something, but then another paragraph will say later that, no, you don't have to do that. So I guess the advice would be is decide what the main material points are that you can live with, what the deliverables are, the dates for the deliverables, how much you're going to get paid, how long they can use it, what they can use it for. And then make sure that's right and push back if it doesn't meet. And to Niel's point, you can do this in an email. At least in California, oral contracts are binding. I can't speak for outside of California, but they're binding. And an email would be some indication of what your agreement was, even if you don't have a signed written contract. So push back. If it's not what you thought it was, the agreement, just say, and it doesn't have to be pushed back in a hard way, but it'd be, I think we have a misunderstanding, or I thought we had agreed to this. Because that's where, again, following Niel's point, that's where you're going to get a lot of disagreements.
John, I have a question for you. So if a brand is giving product, is an influencer obligated to do anything if they're being gifted something versus being paid for the collaboration?
Well, if they're given product and there is a post or a video, you must disclose as if you were paid $100,000. I mean, the rules are, and it doesn't matter who it's from. So if you I've done guest lectures at USC where I went on and followed the Kardashians for a month. And they're forever touting their sister's products or somebody else's products without disclosing that it's an endorsement. It's an endorsement. If somebody gave it to you, you have to disclose. People think, no, I don't have to, but you do. So if somebody sends you out of the blue, say a brand sends you out of the blue a pair of sneakers. Now, why they would do that, I don't know, because how would they know your size? But that's what popped into my head. So they send you a pair of sneakers. You don't have any obligation to do anything with them. But if you do something with them, then you have to disclose that it's an endorsement. But if you're not going to do anything with it and it's a value and you don't want it, I'd echo Niel, send it back. It's just a professional thing to do.
Yeah. And just to make that clear to everybody, what John's referring to, like your need to disclose, that's under federal law, right? In every state in the United States, right, John?
Yeah, it's every if you're going to post in the United States, the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, requires you to do it, and they're actually revising their laws, the rules now, to make it easier to go after smaller influencers, because there's there's too many people kind of getting by with not following the law. So looking at one, making it so you can go after the influencer, which you always could. They typically went after the brand, but now they're going to do after the influencer, and then they're going to go after the advertising agency too. So they're having hearings now about revising it. So you definitely want to follow that, because even if you have 1,000 followers and you're posting, the FTC is an equal opportunity enforcer in the sense of, yes, they'll go after the big ones, but they also want to make a point to the little ones. So smaller micro influencers will know that the rules apply to them as well.
Got it. Okay, that's good to know. Niel, what would you have any tips for negotiation with influencers? I mean, you're seeing so many deals happening, just a great volume of deals happening on your site. What would be your best negotiating tips?
So I think it's really important to understand your own data and then what the brand is trying to accomplish. So for example, if a brand is launching a fitness product, that fitness product might be targeted mostly at women. It might be targeted at men. It might be a mix. And as an influencer, you have your own audience demographics. Are your audience demographics female? Are they male? How skewed are they? There's other dimensions like, when you put, links and swipe ups and stories, what level of clicks do you get through, right? What's the commercial quality of your audience versus others? And so I think a lot of people focus on how many followers you have, what's your engagement rate. There's some formulas you can use to sort of guesstimate what you should be charging for people. But I think the way that you can increase those prices as an influencer is say, okay, great. But on top of that, you're looking for this very specific demographic. This is the demographic that I have. Here's other products that are similar price point or similar category. When I put them on my stories and gotten a swipe up, I've gotten this many clicks. My wife is an influencer with about 10,000 followers. And so she does this very effectively. She ends up getting way above market rate because she actually has an incredibly engaged commercial audience. When she puts products on her stories, she gets and she does a lot of tracking of it with affiliate codes and things like that. She gets incredible clicks and incredible buys. So she can sort of rationally argue for higher price points than just pulling a table of data. And we publish at the bottom of the influence.co website, you can actually see a link on influencer rates, and we actually publish the largest rate survey of influencers in the world. All the influencers in our platform, many of them have rates made public, and we actually compile those so you can sort of see where you are versus everybody else. So if you want to kind of get above the averages, you just have to be thoughtful about how to pair your unique data set and quality of your audience with what the brand wants. And that kind of goes into negotiate. Your best option to negotiate is to find a brand that your audience is really relevant to. If you're just spraying and praying and casting the net and answering every DM that you get and applying to every single thing, you don't really have any leverage, right? Because there's no specificity there. But if you're really being thoughtful about, I would talk about this product anyway, even if you hadn't approached me, and here's why, because my audience like this product and that product, et cetera, then you've already got some leverage with the conversation. I would say, just as a general rule of thumb, brands, it's a lot of a volume game, especially if you're working with micro-influencers. You're reaching out to a lot of people, because if you're reaching out on DMs, the response rate's pretty low. Sometimes you can get maybe 1 out of 10 people responding. Then you kind of go through this quality selection process and funnel. And along the way, what really stands out to brands are people that are actually doing a little bit of research, being a little bit specific, giving them some sort of insight into how working with them is going to work better than the average person they're talking to. Keep in mind that you're sort of in a job interview process with 60, 70, 80, 100 other people. There might be 5, 6, 10 slots there, but you are competing with everybody else. So differentiation in that negotiation process matters. And it's not really about price. Most brands have not done this before. They're very anxious about it. And so if they feel like you are going to help make it a great experience, steward them through and get them outsized results for the same amount of money or just a little bit more money, just like John was saying, right? Know someone, like them and then trust them. You can earn all 3 of those things in the negotiation process, and you don't have to have the bottom of the basement price.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that from the brand side. We, it's all across the board really when it comes to influencers and the rates that we get when we reach out for a collaboration. And there's so many factors that go into it. One thing I think an influencer needs to realize is that, Facebook and Instagram, they've really cracked down on the API access that we have from like the brand perspective. And it really happened with like all the election stuff the last cycle. So we don't necessarily have access to the data other than like engagement rate, but we don't necessarily have access to the data that you're seeing on the back end. So for example, story data, brands have no access to that, or PR agencies have no access to that. So that's one way that you could justify your rate. If you can show, you should be tracking all of that, like how many views you're getting and swipe ups and all of that. Data helps you justify your pricing. So I think that's one thing that's really, really important. And then I also think this is something that Chloe Digital actually in the first session this morning touched upon, which they kept bringing it back to owning your own platform, focusing on your website, your blog, and if you can tie in, a blog post into it, that is kind of like, I always tell a client, when we get a digital placement for you on a blog, on Vogue.com or whatever, it's like an atom bomb. It almost lives forever. It lives for as long as, they're keeping that story on their server. And it's a lot longer than a story, for example, with a swipe up that, disappears in 24 hours. So if you can do something that's just a tiny little bit more effort, but can create an exponential amount of value for the client, then that's another way that you can justify an increased price. And then the third thing that I would say is, if you have a portfolio of really beautiful content and that's what you're focusing on is like the way that you, do your photographs, or maybe you style really great, maybe you do it like in a great vignette with a beautiful background and you have flowers and all of that. Those are all things that you can point out as a point of differentiation. Everybody has their own point of differentiation. So just hone in on what those things are for you. Are you super authentic when you, when you do your stories and you get great engagement and lots of DMs and asking you for links or whatever? Or is it that you have beautiful content? Did you create your own filter that, and with that filter, the photos look beautiful? What is it about, you as an influencer that's your point of differentiation? And I think one other thing that I'll point out is people love attaching media kits to emails, and they're usually like pages long. No one's going to read one that's pages long. There's an influencer that just sent me a quote unquote media kit, and it was one page and it had her rates for different things all on the one page with like her top line stats on the other, on the same page. And I was like, that was the first I've ever gotten. We work with like thousands of influencers every year. And that was the first that I gotten like that. And I was like, this is amazing. It's all on one page. And I immediately forwarded it to all of my clients because I was like, this is so easy for them to digest. I can just forward it to them. And that goes into like what you guys said, make it easy to work with someone. So what do you think, John, you touched on this before about like the billboard on, Sunset Boulevard or whatever. Can you talk a little bit about like usage rights? Because I feel like that's one area where influencers perhaps are not protecting themselves enough.
Right. There's two parts to that. One is ownership of the deliverables. And I can always tell a sophisticated brand because they do not want to own the deliverable. But the new ones always want to own it. It's like, I paid for that. I want to own it. No, you don't. No, you don't. What if there's a trademark lawsuit down the road? You don't want to own that. If there's a copyright lawsuit down the road, you don't want to own that. If there's some right of publicity issues that come up, you don't want to own that. You, the influencer, you want the influencer to own it. And the influencer wants to own it so they can use it forever. If it's a video, at some point, the contract will end and you can turn on AdSense on that YouTube video. So you want to own it. But then now to get down in the weeds with the IP, the intellectual property, is you want to look at, if you're the influencer, you want to see what uses they can make of, let's say it's a static Instagram post. So it is a photo of you sipping a new kind of latte. How long can that be used? How long do you have to keep it up? In the sense of, can you ever take it down? I don't know that you'd want to, but if you wanted to, can it be used in print advertising? So if it's a fantastic photo, it gets great traction, you get a lot of feedback that's positive. Can they put it in print advertising? Can they put it on their website? The brand put it on their website. Typically, the deals will allow the brand to boost your post. They can whitelist it, or they can put it on their own social media platforms. But can they keep it there forever? So you want to talk about how long. It's a matter of how long and where it can be put. Because a deal that includes just digital, and I put just digital because most of them are just digital, that they try to also include traditional media, well, that's worth twice as much, at least twice as much. So you don't want to give that. If you're an influencer, you want to make sure that you've understood the use and for how long, and can the brand then repurpose it in a year? You know, is this like a Geico commercial where you see them redo the Geico commercials? Not only on the East Coast that they have these commercials, but on the West Coast, they replay them. You know, every couple of years, it's the same commercial. Do you get paid, or is it a one-time use? It should be a one-time use unless you're getting paid. So it's the usage issues on where it can be used. And when they say the word, the legal term to watch out for is in perpetuity. If you see the word in perpetuity, that means forever, and you don't want that unless they can keep it in perpetuity for archival purposes, for internal use only. Okay, fine. But can they use your image in perpetuity? That means you can be a grandma, and they could be doing something that you shot when you were 18. You don't want that. So you just want to look out for how long and where it can be used.
Yeah, that absolutely. And even big brands make that mistake. I worked with a big brand that did a celebrity collaboration just a month ago, and it was very clearly stated in the agreement that the brand could not use, even though it was in a film that was being released for Fashion Week, and it was going to be on social media or whatever. But it was very clearly stated that the brand could not act as if this celebrity was endorsing the product in any way. And then the brand put the photo of the celebrity next to the product on their website, selling, selling the product or whatever. And obviously the lawyers immediately made them take it down. So even, and
I would ask for a little extra money too.
Yeah. Even large brands will try to push the limits. Sometimes you think, oh, they're so big, they're never gonna, cross the line or whatever, but you do have to be your own advocate or hire an advocate for you, particularly with those larger deals. Niel, have you seen, issues on, the volume of deals that you're seeing, the deal flow that you're seeing? Do you see a lot of issues with usage rights on influence.co?
I would say that smaller influencers and businesses haven't grappled with this very much yet. I think when people take their first steps into influencer marketing, they're trying to collect as much data as they can. And so they're being not sort of thoughtless about what they're doing, but they're trying to just get as many data points as they can quickly. So they're working with influencers, trying to try different types of influencers, maybe a mommy blogger audience versus a fitness influencer audience versus a pet influencer audience might be more reactive to me. And so a lot of the efforts that we see are around that before people are getting into much more structured and organized purchases of influencer, sometimes content or content plus audiences. And so that's the phase that we see most people on our platform coming into, not so much in much more sort of sophisticated celebrity level stuff that you're talking about. But I think what's also happening is that brands are realizing, I think the brand mentality has shifted from, I want access to influencers because I want their audiences. I sort of view them as media properties or little mini magazines, owned by one person, and I want to get, in front of the audience that reads that magazine. To part of the job of a brand now is to have a constant stream of branded content that's unique and contextualized into hundreds or thousands of different lifestyles. I sort of use the example where, when I grew up, you would go to malls. And if you went to a mall, you would see the Tommy Hilfiger store, and it would be the same ad and window display in every single Tommy Hilfiger store. And everybody consumed the exact same like visual. This generation wants a brand contextualized into the lives of every single influencer that they're interested in. And they want to see it in 100 different ways, in 100 different settings. And so brands are starting to realize that that is actually the job of marketing, is to create branded content in situ, tons and tons and tons of it. And it's about the audience value, but also about just the content creation in situ. And so I think that that wave is turning into a tsunami, and it's coming very quickly. So not a ton of it now, but I think people are just, as influencer marketing evolves and people are realizing that the world is about 1,000 ads, not one ad, that is going to become an even more important thing, because people are going to want to use that content. Even as something as simple as, can I take the image that you created for your Instagram and can I put it on my Instagram as the brand? Like, that's a very simple example. I think a lot of up and coming influencers would be like, heck yeah, promote me. And I think that's fine. But as you get bigger and bigger and bigger, promote me might not be your number one thing. It might be protect me. And so then you get into the stuff that you and John are talking about, where you need to think about protecting yourself versus promoting yourself. And that's just the spectrum. There's nothing wrong with being on the part of the spectrum where you're like, please use my image everywhere forever, right? That's fine. That's a part of the journey. At some point in time, you'll have climbed the ladder a little bit and you'll start to think more specifically about it than that.
Yeah, and we've seen that with influencers. You know, we've been doing this for quite some time, and I actually started out as a blogger. I wouldn't call myself an influencer, but and so I have a lot of friends that, like, before Instagram even started, that, you know, now they're big influencers. And in the beginning, they'd be so flattered when a brand would post them, you know, on and tag them on Instagram. And now, of course, they're much more protective about that. I would say my advice would be, I think potentially allowing them to repost on the Instagram feed is fine, but like something like a website or in an ad or a billboard, even when you're small, you want to be protective of your image, and there's a cost to that. And I would also say, to tag onto what you said, Neil, it's interesting how you have predicted this evolution, and it's kind of happened also with the name. Like, right when it first started, you were called a blogger and then an influencer, and now people are sort of shifting to calling themselves content creators. And it's because they're creating content. And one of the things that I would say for the last 2 or 3 years, we've always told brands, you should really look at what an influencer is doing, not just that they're promoting your product, but because you don't know what kind of results you're necessarily going to get, especially since you don't have access to their, like, you know, back end data. But they're creating content for you. It's like having like a little mini photographer and stylist and all of these things all rolled into one, and there's a value in that. So we always tell brands to look at the content they create as, like, you know, something that is of value. And that's usually on our side. What we try to negotiate for is to be able to repost. If they paid for a hard post, we want our brand to be able to repost that hard post. So just, you know, a little tip on the influencer side. I think that's one definite place that things are going to grow. I mean, if you're a brand, even if you're a baby brand, if you're posting one image a day on Instagram, that's 365 images that you need per year. And that's a lot. And, you know, John can tell you that legally, you can't just use any image that you want to use, and you can get yourself in hot water because images are copyrighted. So a brand has a lot of content that they have to create, and not a lot of resources that they can go to find original content that's not copyright protected.
And I would actually say that there's actually, in this moment in time, it's very much in the favor of the brand if you think about it from like a cost arbitrage perspective. So I just had a daughter. She's 6 months old now, and so I look at a lot more baby-related content than I ever have before. And I saw this incredible piece of content. This is like when I was looking at strollers, where an influencer couple had basically taken, they'd gone on vacation to Germany, and they were up in the hills overlooking like Neuschwanstein or some castle or something like that. And they took this unbelievable photography of the stroller there. And I thought to myself, like, that's one of probably 1,000 different contexts which a stroller is being put in. A brand could never fund the complete construction of that trip to get that piece of content. They're only paying for probably the $1,000 that the influencer charged for the actual content creation, but they didn't pay for the $100,000 of, cost around it. So it's actually a really good deal right now. If you find these influencers who are like maybe a streetwear influencer and a mommy blogger and a travel influencer or whatever, they're literally taking your product at no cost to you and inserting it into a context, an aesthetic, a lifestyle, et cetera, that would cost you an incredible amount of money to produce and charging you $100, $1,000, whatever. So it might sound scary as a brand to think about having to create 365 posts a day, but it's actually incredibly stacked in your favor now to get the breadth and distribution of being able to present your brand in a bunch of different lifestyles, which expands your potential audience as well, at a cost that is just for the cost of producing the picture, not producing the container of the picture, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it's definitely a good deal for a brand for sure. And I think brands, if they can think of it like that, I think it makes sense. Okay, so John, I'm going to lead the last question with you, and then we have some audience questions that we'll go through.
Okay.
People are often like afraid to hire an attorney, and I get this. I'm an of counsel at a law firm, and I do some part-time work in Moonlight. They're often afraid to hire an attorney because they think it's too expensive. But and Kat, the attorney that I work with, we always talk about it like, this is your business, Can you talk about some of the things that an influencer should absolutely have an attorney handle?
Even if you are just starting out, at some point a manager will approach you or you will approach a manager, and the manager will give you a contract to review. And so many influencers are so excited, a manager wants to represent me. I don't care how much money you're making. That's a point where and you're going to have to do it on an hourly basis, but hire a lawyer to look at that document, because the vast majority of my clients come to me after they have a problem with their first manager and they want to change managers and they want me to help negotiate out of that management agreement, but they're in for 5 years, or they're in for 3 years. So at the initial point where you need a lawyer is when you're getting ready to hire a manager, just to make sure it's straight up, because there's great managers. There's some fantastic managers. And then there are managers who aren't as ethical and aren't looking out for their client the way they probably should. And then once you're working with a manager, you'll know when it's time to get a lawyer, because the manager will tell you it's time to get a lawyer. but as a rule of thumb, anytime your deals are over $10,000, you definitely want a lawyer involved. And all but one of my clients, I'm on a percentage basis, and the standard fee is 5% of gross. So it's not like you're coming for money out of your pocket, other than when you're doing the original management contract. It's money that you would be making, and you're getting, of the team, the lawyer is the cheapest person on the team, believe it or not. Because the manager will typically charge 15%, 10 to 15%. If you have an agent, they charge 10%. The lawyers, industry standard is 5%, although I know some that charge more than that. So when you believe that you have the volume of deals where you know that you're in this for the long haul, this is what you're going to do as your primary source of income, as opposed to a brand deal once every 6 months. You definitely want to seek out a lawyer, because many times the terms are not, for the reasons we've talked about, on the usage and other things, they're not as they're not as fair as they should be. And if you've seen enough of the deals, I know where the middle ground is. I know what's fair. I know when the influencer, I actually had a brand ask me, I represented the influencer, and the brand said, "Can you write the contract for us?" And I said, "Absolutely, I can write the contract for you." It's the best influencer deal we got. But you want somebody to circle back around and actually answer your question. When you get to about the $10,000 gross amount of the contract, that's when you really want to think about getting a lawyer involved. Because if you think about it, it's only $500, and it's not out of your pocket. It's just from the money you'll be getting. And for that $500, you're going to get so much protection. And anything over that, absolutely, you need a lawyer. Because you get into the $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 deals or beyond, you just want that protection. And
Yeah.
by that time, all of my clients that are in that area don't even blink an eye. They're like, this is just the cheapest insurance I could buy, is to have a
Right.
lawyer look at that.
Yeah, and I would also say too, I think people have this idea that lawyers are really expensive, and I'm not saying that all are, but you can usually find a lawyer somewhere along your journey. I was on a panel not too long ago, and somebody was talking about like, well, if you can't afford the lawyer at the big slick law firm that has, the view on Madison Avenue, you start with a lawyer that maybe graduated, 5, 6 years ago and is a little bit younger. And there are, your hourly rate, it's like, for example, since I don't practice full time, my hourly rate is much lower than Kat, who owns the law firm that, I'm an of counsel at, because she's been practicing full time for many, for much longer than me. So her hourly rate is higher than mine. Doesn't mean that I'm not a good lawyer. It just means that my rate is commensurate with my experience, right? So that would be another piece of advice that I would give somebody. And then the other thing too, I see influencers they come to me a lot of times, influencers that we work with, even though, I don't really practice full time, I have a PR agency, but we'll get a lot of influencers that'll come to us with like maybe a reality show, TV deal or something like that. And I would say if anybody comes to you in that entertainment space where you're going to be filmed and something's going to be on TV, Amazon, Hulu, Netflix, whatever, it's worth it to get a lawyer.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the spin-off on all of these. We've done many reality shows for the clients. They'll have book deals. There'll be the merchandise deals. If you're going to be in stores with DIY kits, we'll do those deals. I'm just thinking this, when you're starting out, it's the brand deal. But I forgot to mention, if you believe you can't afford a lawyer, you still have to comply. We have free resources on our website that you can download. You don't have to give your email to get them. You can just go to the website and get them. They're do's and don'ts, which is commensurate with this panel, but they're also the proper disclosures for FTC for each of the platforms.
And John, can you give us the name of your website so that we can?
Sure, it's
we can write it down.
Pfeiffer, just the way my name is spelled on the Zoom, pfeifferlaw.com.
So that's going to be P as in Paul, FEIFFER law.com.
Yes. And there's a social media section where I think we have 10 downloads, and again, they're free. It will at least get you in compliance. So you don't have to worry about, did I do the right disclosure or not?
That's so great. Well, so now we're going to take some questions that we got from the audience. The first one is for Niel. How does Influence.co simplify the collaboration process?
Sure. So we try to focus on all the parts of the collaboration process that take a lot of time. So right out of the gates, what takes a lot of time is finding influencers. So as I mentioned, you can use the platform for free, and we have tons of search tools that help you kind of hone in on who you want really quickly. You also can put up a campaign brief, which is like a job description, and you can set filters for who can apply to you, and then have people apply to you. You can also do that for free. There are some limits to it, but you can do that for free on the platform as well. So that really reduces the amount of time that you need to spend hunting through Instagram, looking through hashtags, looking through the community, and really have people that are interested in your brand apply to you. That's one thing. The second thing is, we talked about media kits before. If you go to influence.co and you just click around a little bit, you'll come across our profiles. We're the first company to ever have public profiles. We basically built digital media kits. And there's a lot of subtlety into how we built the digital media kits that goes back to what Lori was saying. Every single person in the community builds their own resume. We don't scrape databases. There's no AI here. It's actually humans doing this. And what they do is they pick and choose the branded content that they've created before, and they put that on their profile. So right out of the gates, you can see who they've worked with. So you don't have to go rifling through their Instagram, opening up photos, looking for the brand tags and the hashtags. The second thing is you can get a very quick take on their aesthetic, and it matters a lot. Lori mentioned that it's tough because you don't have access to the APIs. We have access to all the APIs. Everybody gives us that access when they sign up. So we have engagement rates, we have likes and comments on all their photos. You can see the likes and comments on their branded content versus generally speaking on their content. We really consolidated everything that you need out of a media kit to get a very quick read on it. And the reason I say that is because if you're looking at 60, 70, 100 different possible candidates to work with, it's really time consuming if you have to open up Instagram and open up 10 of each photo and try to find the stuff that's branded and the people comment on it. We've organized our media kit so you can very quickly look, are they an aesthetic fit? Are they a numeric fit? We've got audience demographics that are built in, totally freely available on the platform. That takes a lot of the time out. We have application management and workflow tools that allow you to sort of like keep the whole process clean. Our system is fully integrated with the messaging system. So it's just really a pain when you're trying to communicate with 30 people. If you're doing that in the email box, I challenge you to actually give the real name of every influencer that you've probably looked at in the last 2 days. You probably don't know, you probably know their handle. And then on top of that, what is their email address? It's incredibly hard to dig through your work email address and find a thread from one influencer if you're working with 30. Having it all in one place just really simplifies it. And then, one of the other things that we spent time on is when you actually are running your campaign, you're doing a lot of publishing. If you're trying to publish like 30 different people, have them publish content within the same 2 or 3 days, you'll literally spend hours a day going through every single person's Instagram trying to figure out if they published or not yet. And we built a tool that essentially does reporting for you and helps you understand who's published, who hasn't published, if they have published, what are the likes and engagements, calculate a big, beautiful sheet of imagery that you can print out and hand to your bosses or your partners, or the case may be. Where we are very focused on being a mostly free and practically priced solution if you do decide to go pro. That is oriented at like, what are the things that take a lot of time, and reducing that time to where you can do influencer marketing for about 15 minutes a day. So it's kind of a collection of things that we do to manifest that into reality. But that's where we've focused our energy, is just streamlining the process.
Amazing. Well, we are out of time. We could probably go on and talk all day long about this. I want to thank both of you, Niel and John, so much. So Niel, influencers can go on influence.co and sign up, right?
Sign up, totally free. Start applying to brands today. Build your profiles. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say my best advice for influencers is definitely create a profile with influence.co. It is definitely one of the industry gold standards. A lot of brands are on there and working with them. So if you're starting up or trying to take things to the next level, they're a great resource. Niel, thank you so much for joining us today. And John, thank you so much for your insightful information. The legal part of things can be scary for a lot of people. So I feel like you made it not so scary.
Thank you. It was fun.
Yeah. Thank you both.
All right.
John, I learned a lot.
Take care.
You guys have a really great day, and thank you again. And if anybody needs to get in touch with them, it's pfeifferlaw.com and then influence.co. Thank you guys. Have a great day.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
That's it for this time. If you enjoyed our podcast, please write a review on iTunes and tell your friends to subscribe. If you have any questions about influencers or suggestions for future episodes, email them to John at Pfeiffer@pfeifferlaw.com. Thank you for listening.